like paranoia, hallucinations, and a lot of things can get even worse with it. All right, I want to get into this brain test because this is where we actually have correlated changing those brain scans by changing the fatty acid profiles of the actual blood cells. Okay, so the first thing we test is what's called the omega-3 index. Okay, now the omega-3 index, basically all it is if we look at the cell membrane, and this test is so important to know. This test measures the cell membrane, the RBC cell membrane. This is not a plasma or serum-based test. Okay, plasma or serum would be more like a glucose test. That's going to depend on what you ate today, what's free-floating in plasma. Okay. The cell membrane takes 90 to 120 days to assimilate. Your cells turn over about every 90 to 120 days. And so we want to measure this so we can get a long-term, this is more like an A1C test, as far as we can get a long-term status of what your omega-3 deficiencies or the proper amount are. And basically the number that we get in the index is the percentage of EPA and DHA, so we're taking all these little phospholipids, the omega-3s, the EPA and DHA, compared to all the rest of the fatty acids in that cell membrane. So an 8%, or an 8.5% score means that 8.5% of all the fatty acids in the cell membrane are omega-3s, EPA or DHA. Okay? So that's basically how you do the score. Now the reason this is important, and omega-3s are at the core, I would say probably the most important foundational supplement or thing you can get in your diet that there is. And the reason being is because the omega-3 has this little crooked tail that pops out. Okay? Now that allows for more cell diffusion, allows for more cell absorption. Think about if we all stood in a circle and we were all tight side by side. Okay, that's how these phospholipids are all bounced around. Now the omega-3 is like me being like this. Okay, which would allow more space between the next person. So it allows for a couple things. It allows for more cell diffusion to come through, so the cell can actually get nutrients from outside through into the mitochondria and into the nucleus and fuel it. Okay, it can also allow for neurotransmitters to be passed from cell to cell better because it has to go through these synapses to each thing, and actually the more omega-3s, the more electrical transference you have, or cell to cell signaling you have across those things. Okay, so you want, if you're not doing the making sure you have enough omega-3s in your cells before you start any other diet, or you can have the best Mediterranean diet, if you don't have enough omega-3s, majority of that's going right through and not getting absorbed by the cells. Okay. Yes?
So basically, what I'm understanding of the problem is it's affecting the cell permeability?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yep, and the cell permeability is important for nutrients coming in and for waste products going out and cell-to-cell signaling of neurotransmitters. All that. Exactly. So, and the cell permeability also allows for the absorption of those. So it's important to get that right. And yes?
Supposed to help with insulin resistance?
We're going to get to that. And there is a huge part of cell fluidity that helps for insulin resistance. The omega-3s will help. The omega-3s, and there's another thing called palmitic acid that can work with insulin resistance on that. But the omega-3s are so important for this to have enough. The other thing omega-3s do is it provides what's called cell fluidity, which really think of it as flexibility of that membrane. Okay? Again, if we're not tightly packed, if we're tightly packed, that's very cell rigidity, okay, which makes it very rigid, which means that it's almost like a brittle piece of plastic. Okay, those neurons, if they get slammed around, inside your head, if they get slammed around inside your skull, those neurons, the dendrites, can break across, they can twist, they can stretch, which causes lack of electrical activity, they can twist, they can do all kinds of things. Where when you have enough omega-3s, it creates all this flexible thing because it's not so jam-packed. So it's like having a very flexible piece of plastic, okay, that can move around. And you can actually stretch it and it comes right back. So someone that has enough omega-3s, there are studies that show you become 10 times more resilient to concussion activity. Okay, if you can do this ahead of time. It's the best thing you can do to bounce back from concussions. They took a whole group of rats, about 100 rats in the control group that were just fed a regular diet, and 100 rats that were fed in the high DHA and EPA diet, omega-3s, and they put them through a maze, and they found their exact times that they go on average and stuff. And then they put them into these contraptions, and they thump them on the head with a pretty sizable thump. Okay, the ones that did not have the high omega-3s, a lot of them actually died from the thump. Okay, not one died from the high EPA DHA. The other side is that the ones that didn't die could not make it through the maze, and even the timed out. It was a tremendous amount of difference between. The other ones, within 2 days, were able to go through the maze at the exact same times as they did before. Okay? So, in one of the authors of that said he would actually rather have his kid play football with over an 8% omega-3 index than even wear a helmet. Okay? Because a helmet's not going to protect against concussion. Helps against open head injury and problems of slamming in and actually having trauma to the head. But how much of that do you have versus concussion? Concussion is constant all the way through. It's that jarring, it's that whiplash. You put a helmet on, you're actually increasing the weight on your head, which increases the chance of whiplash. Every kid that's playing any type of impact sport, including, girls soccer is one of the worst we see. Cheerleading is horrible. Obviously any of the impact sports, for the males too. But they should have above 8%. Probably starting next year, it looks like Oaks Christian's going to make this mandatory to play high impact sports. That you'll have to do this as part of a physical. Okay, that's how important it is. So, again, it's not just about treating after a concussion or getting the recovery side, which there's a lot of things with omega-3s you can do. Really, at that point, you're trying to contain inflammation and the cascade effects that happens. But becoming resilient to it is the most important here. And you can see also on this, in the report, what's great about our reports is it actually takes peer-reviewed journals and studies, and these aren't small little things. This is JAMA Neurology. This is... all kinds of major journals that are on each of these things, and this shows you where your score is compared to the groups of people that were in the studies. So you have a higher risk. You have 47% lower risk of dementia, according to JAMA Neurology, when that was used with our test, if you're in that green area. So if you're above that 8%, you have a lower risk. Improved short-term memory. That was an Oxford study. Better focus in learning at school. Improved mood and lower anxiety versus all those things too. So, again, we're trying to ride the line of not telling someone they're going to get these things. Because you get some people that, they have no omega-3s practically in them, and they live perfectly and have no dementia. You don't know those things. But if you look at the risk factors and you look at the large studies, the randomized controlled studies, and you see where you are compared to that, I don't want to be in that red group. And you can change this in 90 days. Your RBCs change every 90 days. Now, one thing that's important to realize is that if I go from here to here in 90 days, that really does not rid my risk, right? I mean, in 90 days, you're not going to change. Most nutritional things and the way the cells function, it's if they're functioning optimally over time. So that's where you want to retest, and even once a year, you should be doing this test and constantly keep it up that. And you want to live in this green. The longer you live in this green, the less chance of cell problems or cell death you have. And the interesting thing too is, they did a 10-year study with telomeres. Okay, telomeres are the little end caps of the DNA structure, right? And every time a cell splits, the telomere breaks down until finally it falls apart and you have cell death. Okay, so it's probably one of the best forms of biological aging we have. And when you had above an 8% in your omega-3 status, you had a 65% reduction in telomere aging. Okay. Everybody should do it purely just for skin health. All right, this is the best anti-aging. We're not just talking about the neurons of the brain. This is every cell in your body decays 65% slower. Okay, so that's where you can, for heart health, this is huge. Someone that goes in a 90 or over an 8% after one heart attack has a 90% less chance of another heart attack if they're above 8%. Okay, and so this is, again, this is foundational stuff that everybody should be doing. This is so much more important than any cholesterol test or anything. You get your omega-3 3's right. Your triglycerides are right. Your cholesterol is going to balance out. I mean, it really comes down to cholesterol more to particle size and things as well than just specific, LDL. So, but it's literally the most important. We talked about how it absorbs the food more and gets into the cell. The other thing is the cell-to-cell signaling, which we talked a little bit about too. You can, if you improve the omega-3 status, the cell-to-cell signaling and neurotransmitter transmission across those cells, you can get nearly the same you get from medication, from taking Adderall or taking a serotonin inhibitor or taking GABA or any of these things. You can actually increase that almost the same, but it's all natural and all of the neurotransmitters are working together the right way. You want to keep that balance. When you just give 1 or 2, you're actually not correcting the problem and you're just in some ways adding to issues. So when you get this right, someone with ADHD, you give them this, you have more dopamine now, more excitatory neurons in the frontal lobe. They can pay attention longer. You have someone with high anxiety and stress, you give them this, their serotonin regulates proper. Okay, you get someone that's constantly going and constantly just in this, the motor's just running. You give them their GABA actually regulates and can regulate their basal ganglia and stuff and come back down and not have so much anxiety and panic attack and stuff like that. So it's so important. You can see with above an 8% versus below a 4% on the omega-3 index, again under a microscope. This person, again, notice how many connections are there. In a concussion injury, they can afford to lose a couple. They can afford shearing to happen. They can afford a little bit of tearing to happen. This person over here only has a couple. A couple of those tear away, they have to grow back, which can take a long time, and that's where you have all these post-concussion syndrome and everything that happens. It's the longer it takes to grow back, the more those symptoms can occur. Okay? Every single person that is, pregnant, thinking about getting pregnant, or that has, a young baby, should definitely be on high omega-3s. The baby's brain is being formed in the 3rd trimester. Okay, and in that 3rd trimester is when you need as much omega-3s as you can, because it goes right through. It shows higher, IQs, higher motor development, all these things. The interesting thing is I saw a study the other day that showed that mothers, when they're stressed, which how many mothers are stressed during pregnancy? Good amount. When they're stressed, they actually inhibit some of the enzyme processes that allow the baby to get some of these omega-3s. So they actually get less omega-3s. And when you get less omega-3s, it doesn't form as many connections in the baby's brain. And when there's less connections, think of it as almost like a weak muscle. You just passed on to the baby a thinner connections in the brain, which now they will have more stress throughout their whole life because of the fact that they don't have as much, muscle or enough neural pathways and neural connections to handle the load of things that happen. Okay, so that's where the great part is if you take enough omega-3s, even if you're stressed, it's going to still get through to the baby. So if you up the dose, you're doing fine. Plants. Okay, ALA is great for your body. It's a great energy source. There's all kinds of great things, okay? But it has to convert to DHA to get through the blood-brain barrier and to do anything for the brain. Okay? About an average of 1% to sometimes up to 10%. So probably I'd say a total average about 5% of it converts. Which means if you're trying to get for your baby's brain, if you're trying to get for your brain or change your brain health, you're eating about 2 pounds of flaxseed for every 1 teaspoon of fish oil to get the same amount. Okay? So don't count on ALA from plants to help you with your brain health. The only time it does a little bit with in the 3rd trimester is you produce a little bit different enzyme structure, and it actually can convert up to 20 to 30% of plant-based ALA into DHA. And it's right during the time when the baby's brain is being developed. So that's an interesting thing, then that goes away. So that's the only time.
How does that ALA get converted? In a simple short format.
Yeah, it's metabolized differently and stuff, and breaks down from ALA. It changes the actual carbon structure of it into DHA.
Is there anything particular that will allow it to do that, like a certain enzyme?
No, it requires an enzyme, to do it. There's a certain enzyme, again, and it's so inefficient at converting it, takes so long, that it averages about 5% before it's out of your body and converting, because it's such a slow process. Yeah.
And I think I saw this somewhere, but isn't it also
depend on the health of the person who's, if they're not as healthy, they're not going to break that down as.
So I think what you're talking about is, and we're going to get to that next, is this AA omega-6 to 3 ratio. Okay, so the healthier you are, the less omega-6s you should be eating. Okay, now omega-6s are great for you. There's not a problem. I don't want to demonize omega-6s. There's a lot of great omega-6s, but there's so much omega-6s. It's in such abundance in our food supplies that it's way out of balance. Okay, and omega-6s are, especially arachidonic acid, AA, is very pro-inflammatory. Omega-3, especially EPA, is very anti-inflammatory. You need a nice balance. Okay, and so the lower amount of omega-6s you have in your diet, the less omega-3s you need to balance that out. So that's where a strict vegan or strict vegetarian stuff, if they're eating enough, most still are not going to have enough EPA just from plants, but they come pretty close. The stricter their diet, they can come pretty close to balancing it out. Versus someone who's eating a lot of processed foods is going to need a tremendous, and they're going to need to eat fish like 4 times a day just to balance out, or take omega-3 supplement.
Question: when they say to eat a lot of the salmon and the fish, but that's all cooked in high heat, that will destroy the omega-3.
The omega-3s, there is some destruction of the phospholipid at that point. There's still a lot that gets through at certain heats. If it was super high heat, yes. But cooked salmon still has an average of over 1,000 milligrams of EPA DHA. So it's more the fried type foods like tilapia and stuff like that they don't have a lot to start with. Yeah. But the cooked salmon actually has more than even sushi, which is raw. Now, not salmon sushi, but compared to like tunas and stuff like that, they're kind of mid-level. Where salmon or herring or anchovy, the oilier the fish, the better, on it. All right.
And coconut oil would probably help, right?
What's that?
Coconut oil? Because that doesn't degrade under heat. So.
Yeah, but the coconut oil is not going to give you the EPA or DHA from it. So you're going to get the MCTs from it, right. But you're not going to get the EPA and DHA, so it's not necessarily going to affect the same thing. It's still healthy. Then, so you're saying cook the fish with coconut oil. Gotcha. I see where you're coming from. Yes, exactly. Right. Again, we talked about improves, you want to fix ADHD for the majority of the country, get them on a better diet. I saw some women the other day that were in Starbucks, and they were, in the morning, and they're getting both their kids, a Frappuccino and cake pops, and then sitting there talking about why these kids are just ridiculous with ADHD, and they don't know what they're going to do. They're going to probably have to put them on stimulant medication. And if they only knew what they were doing to that, all the studies, this is as effective. You change this, it's as effective as stimulant, but it's natural, and it's going to change. It's going to keep everything in balance. It's so important. Again, we talked about concussion resilience and recovery as well. Anti-aging, again, 47% lower chance of aging. This is an important slide because most doctors you go to will say, hey, I've reviewed the last 10 years of studies on omega-3s, and it's really mixed. It's all over the place. There's some that show no change at all and others that show a lot of change. Okay? Now, all you have to do, this is every peer-reviewed study on omega-3s over the last 10 years. Okay? All you have to do is sort it by dose. Sort them by dose. You've got all the high dose, all studies showing significant changes. All the low dose, studies showing no change. Now, the only other variable in this is that Time Magazine just did a study and showed that 80% of fish oil that's on the market is rancid, oxidized oil, meaning that you're going to get no benefit. Okay? You could also argue the free radical damage and everything too of those. But, so no benefit at least if it's oxidized. So everybody's going to, Costco and to all these things. They're getting low dose. If you go to Costco, I was just there the other day, and I like to look. I'm probably the only one that goes in the omega-3 aisle and looks at all the omega-3s. But but we were able to look at, and you could see that all the front says 1,000 milligrams of fish oil. You turn it over, 100 milligrams of EPA, 100 milligrams of DHA. You're at 200 milligrams, and it's probably rancid already because it's probably been sitting in a warehouse forever. Okay. The other thing is that the one other one I picked up at Costco, it said 1,000 milligrams of fish oil. I picked it up on the back. It says EPA and DHA not listed. I don't even know how that's legal. But, so it has to be a high enough dose, and it has to be a good quality fish oil, okay? You should not get something that's oxidized. So if the fish oil, that's why typically, I personally like, the actual liquids, because, I don't ever drink rotten milk because I taste it and smell it and I spit it out. Right? If you are getting rotten milk in capsules or gel caps or constantly, you might not ever know until you find out later it was probably rotten. So typically, if I don't know the company well and trust the company well, I'll stick with oils because I can smell it. And if it smells rancid, they also don't store it in warehouses for these are refrigerated oils half the time and stuff. They have expiration dates on stuff. It's shipped differently. You can smell it. If it just tastes like rancid fish, always will have a small little bit of fish to taste it. But if it's just rancid damn fish, that'd be like, would you ever put a piece of sushi up that just stunk like rotten fish? I mean, you'd never eat that, right? And it's the same thing. It's just oxidation. Okay, so that's real important is get the right. And that's a great slide to show any patients or anything because you got to get the quality product. The next thing we're talking about is, again, AA to EPA ratio. Okay, this is really the inflammatory state of the cell. So this is how much AA, which is a fatty acid, in the cell membrane compared to EPA. You want a nice balance of about a 1-to-1. Okay, at least a Japanese diet is about 3-to-1. Mediterranean diet is about 4-to-1. In our test, we go all the way to 6-to-1 to give optimal. Okay, the average American is 24-to-1. Okay, I saw someone the other day was 72-to-1. Okay, these are pro-inflammatory versus anti-inflammatory. Okay, and now realize this is not measuring CRP levels or cortisol levels. This is measuring the trigger that sets off the hormonal effects that sets off all the inflammation. So this is measuring it at the core, at the cause of it, not just the value of what's in your system at this time based on whatever your circumstances are today. Okay? So if you have this right, your cells will only initiate inflammation when it's needed. If you have it wrong, you get a little bit of emotional stress. You get a little bit of gluten in your system. You get a little bit of lactose. Your body sends off this whole cortisol response all throughout the system. Okay? As most people that are gluten sensitive have a high omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. Okay? And that means that, yes, they are getting an inflammatory response in their system from something like gluten. We shouldn't. It should be a benign stimulus to our body. Our system shouldn't set off all this inflammation to that. I could argue it's probably not the best thing for you and stuff. And it's a lot of it. Gluten comes from a lot of carbs and stuff too. So it's best you can't get rid of it. But argue it from that side. You don't want your body, because you had a little bit of gluten, to set off this inflammatory side. And most of it's because these triggers. And if that trigger is wrong, this is very much, and explain it to people like, if I gave you a 1-to-1 ratio, that's like giving you a gun for security that's locked up in a safe with a trigger guard, unloaded, that's there if you need it, and you can pull it out and you can use it, right? But you have to be very intentional to use that. In 24-to-1, that's like giving someone a gun that's fully loaded, hair trigger, all cocked, bullets in it, and saying, here, catch, play with this for a little bit. Okay? It's going to go off, right? And so any little thing's going to set this off, versus if it's nice and balanced, it actually will control it. Now, most pain medication that we take, is actually inhibiting the omega-6, the AA to EPA, the enzymes that convert that. So when you take pain medication, Advils and different things like that, it's actually stopping, it's inhibiting this same process that if you just had your diet balanced in the first place, wouldn't be there. And the problem with it inhibiting the enzyme process is it causes a lot of other damage. It causes a lot of other things too. Well, it does it. That's why you shouldn't take it that much. But if you get this right, your pain goes down. I mean, so many studies show that this is, the best pain response. Again, 24-to-1. This is normal, for the United States. One of the best ways to stop chronic muscle pain, musculoskeletal pain, is getting the omega-3 to 6 ratio right, because you're controlling the inflammatory response. Pain really is an inflammatory response. It's a symptom from an inflammatory response. You control that inflammatory response, you don't get the pain, especially chronic pain. Okay? It also improves muscle recovery and athletic performance after you push yourself. So after you stress yourself, it doesn't set off this chronic inflammatory response again whenever we go to the gym or do anything where you feel sore forever. It actually lowers CRP levels. It actually lowers blood lactate levels, gets them all back to normal. So if you have any athlete that's pushing themselves and putting themselves under a lot of stress, the right AA to EPA ratio brings it right back to normal right afterwards. Yes?
How does someone's digestion affect the 6-to-1? How do you mitigate that?
How does digestion affect that? Well, again, what we're looking at 6-to-1 is what gets in the blood, right? Or what gets in the cell membrane. So if someone is not digesting it, the omega-3s, or if it's oxidized or anything like that, it's not getting into the cells, then you won't see it. There is a lot of things, especially as we get to palmitic acid and things too, that the gut controls so much of the neurotransmitters in the brain, right? And that gut-brain connection is so powerful and everything that, it will, but remember, this that we're talking about, this AA to EPA ratio, is not just in the brain. This is in every cell of your body. So this is in all your intestinal tract. This is in all, every cell, every organ system you have. So this will actually help the digestion system work better, right, without inflammation. It helps your heart work better. It helps everything, your whole nervous system work better. So it's in everything.
So is there anything you do for improved absorption?
Improved absorption in the gut? Or
Like throughout the system?
Well, again, this right here, we're going to talk about palmitic acid, and which I think is really kind of getting to where you're talking about. In this AA to EPA ratio, you don't want as much AA, so you don't want it to even be absorbed in you. Again, you want the higher amount of omega-3s, and the best way to absorb that is to have non-oxidized. As long as it's not oxidized, it will get into your blood cells. There's a direct ratio. We've seen it in tons of studies. But yeah, I think on the palmitic acid side and on a lot of the, we'll get into a little bit more of that gut side of it and probiotics and things like that. So. Again, all these are inflammatory side, right? This affects cancer. This affects arthritis, diabetes, nervous system dysfunction, depression, anxiety. Depression, anxiety are really inflammatory states throughout the cells. Those cells are working too hard, and it's causing all kinds of inflammation. And that inflammation has this trigger, this cascade effects of hormonal issues that change all the way this works and all the way across. So, all right, so now palmitic acid. So this is what we call the cell toxicity index, which is purely a measurement of the amount of palmitic acid in your cells. Okay. Now, we should start with a little bit of history here. A lot of you probably know that for so long, especially back in the 80s, 90s, all the way up to probably current, a lot of doctors are still saying, hey, saturated fat's the problem, right? And the reason being is because palmitic acid is the most prevalent saturated fat in our diet. Okay. And we know for sure that when there is too much palmitic acid in the cell, that it stops leptin signaling, okay, which then after that it stops insulin signaling, okay, and we know that it leads to type 2 diabetes. Palmitic acid leads to type 2 diabetes. No doubt we can prove that over and over and over. So the conclusion was that since palmitic acid in the cell membrane causes that, obviously it's bad to eat palmitic acid. Right? The problem with that theory is that 30% of mother's milk is palmitic acid. So every infant that nursed should have type 2 diabetes. Right? The Polynesian cultures that eat most of the coconut oils and palm oils, and coconut's about 15% palmitic acid, should have all kinds of problems, yet they are the opposite. They have extremely good levels of palmitic acid and lower problems that occur from that. No real type 2 diabetes and stuff, on those large epidemiological studies. So the problem with that is that what in Cleveland Clinic has been the best at really getting this information out is that our bodies have what's called a desaturation process. Okay? So palmitic acid is a 16-carbon chain fatty acid. And we use that, our bodies use that as a precursor, and our bodies break that down depending on what we need. Okay? In a cell, in the cell membrane, it has to have a certain amount of saturated fat, palmitic acid, to maintain the cell shape. Okay, you need the saturation. Again, saturation is just that fat is, solid at room temperature. Okay, so it's stiffer. So we need that palmitic acid to be able to maintain cell shape. Okay, too much unsaturation leads to the cell would just dissipate. It can't hold itself together. Too much saturation leads to cell rigidity, and it becomes too stiff and too hard and stops the transmission. Okay, so it's constantly flowing, and that changes also by even hot and cold. Different temperatures and stuff changes that. Okay, that saturation. So what the body does is when you eat coconut oil or any type of saturated palmitic acid, it goes through and it has it's basically a homeostasis. It knows, start converting this. We have plenty of palmitic acid, plenty of saturated fat, unsaturated. So it goes through this desaturation process. Or if it needs more, it keeps it as the 16 carbon fatty acid and it puts it into the cell. So it constantly changes it through that. So you can eat all the palmitic acid you want. You can eat all of the coconut oil you want at 15%. If you had 3 ice cream scoops a day of that, your cells would never go above 21%. And that's why these Polynesian cultures, they eat tons of coconut all day long, never go above 21%. Okay? It won't go above it. 21% is considered optimal. Okay? Type 2 diabetes is around 27%, 28, 29, 30. The problem is that when you eat sugar, it skips the desaturation process, converts to glucose, hits your liver, it converts, it says the liver basically is saying, do I need to burn this off as energy? If you're running a marathon, you're probably fine. I'll just burn it all off. If you're not, it stores it and converts it to palmitic acid, shoots it into the cells with no desaturation process, and just starts upping the cell, boom, 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 21, 22, 23, 24, and that's what causes type 2 diabetes, is the sugar and the glucose converting to it and bringing that up, because it's skipping the desaturation process. So it's not eating coconut oil that leads to this. Coconut oil is great for you. It has all kinds of MCTs in it and stuff. There's all kinds of things with that. But sugar will do this. Now, the problem with our culture today too is, if you were gnawing on a raw thing of cane, sugar, it has fiber in it, has all kinds of stuff in it. You just can't eat that much, right? And so it slowly converts. You're moving around. Hopefully you're, hunter-gatherer, right, or something. You're moving around and you're burning it off. You're eating a little bit and your blood sugar is staying pretty stable. But with our wonderful inventions of Starbucks and the 4 million other forms of sugar we have, we can put equal to about the sugar from about pretty close to about 20 to 40 oranges of the fructose into one quick thing that you can drink, and you can say, I'm not even full. I could drink one more real quick and shoot it right down. So that much is hitting our liver, all this huge amount at one time, and it's just converting as fast as it can. You can never possibly burn it off, right? Where the best thing you can do if you're going to eat sugar is eat small amounts and move around. You eat small amount, you burn it off. Small amount, burn it off, and you never spike that glycemic level. Yes?
So you're talking about just straight sugar, or sugar with that combination?
Well, again, sugar is the culprit of the majority of cell health problems. This process right here is the majority. So, it's best to not eat much sugar at all. We get plenty of sugar in, a fruit or something that has fiber or something that's a whole food. We get plenty of sugar in that. So
my question is, okay, they want healthy Starbucks, so they put in a tablespoon of coconut oil. Does that mitigate the process, or does it still skip the desaturation?
Still skips the desaturation process. A little bit of coconut oil will go through it, but the sugar won't. Because remember, the sugar is not fat at that time. Only fat goes through this process.
No, I just wanted to make sure it didn't inhibit the...
No, it won't change it at all. Still makes it just as bad. And most of the coconut, milk and stuff that Starbucks uses, look at it. It's coconut flavored sugar water, basically. It's not, may have a little tiny bit of it. I think they got sued because it didn't have any in it, and I think they added a little bit to it. So this process is huge. And the other thing I want to show you on this, let me go back one slide, or one more slide, is leptin, a lot of people know what insulin is and how insulin resistance works, but leptin is the precursor to that. So it's way before the type 2 diabetes. If you start getting a buildup of palmitic acid, it inhibits the leptin response in your body. Leptin is what connects your brain. Leptin signaling connects your brain to your fat cells. Okay, leptin says you just ate, you're full. Okay, and so it gives you the sense of full, and it automatically goes back to those fat cells and says, okay, we got plenty. Start burning fat, and it starts burning it, and it increases metabolism. Okay, so it does all these things. Okay, it does all the signaling that makes you feel full, starts burning fat. When you have leptin resistance, which you get from too much palmitic acid, way before type 2, you stay in this starvation mode, okay, where the brain never gets the signal that you're full. So you constantly are hungry. The brain is constantly saying you're in starvation mode, so it's lowering your metabolism to store your energy. It's lowering. It's telling your fat cells, store the fat. Do not burn fat. Burn them as slow as you can. And that's what causes a lot of weight gain. And it causes a lot of other issues too. It can lead to obesity and stuff as well. But it stops you from doing that. So any diet that is, you're trying to go low calorie, if you're doing low calorie with sugar in it, you're still completely ruining your diet. Okay? So getting rid of the sugar gives you the sense of full. It allows your body to burn the fat, and it brings up your metabolism, so you have more energy as well. Okay.
One question, Brian.
Yeah.
In your research and all of that you've seen, how do sugar substitutes, sugar alcohols, anything like that play into that as well? I know there's conflicting things about it, raising insulin levels.
Stevia is low glycemic. So it doesn't hit and spike all at once. So it trickles and trickles to the liver, just little bits at a time, which gives you plenty of time just with normal movement to burn that off. The other sugars go, especially fructose is the worst. It goes directly to it, and it's just so much spike on your system. So that's where stevia, it'll still take this route, but it won't convert. Now, obviously, if you took just tons and tons of stevia, it's still going to convert a little bit higher than what you would want, but for the most part, stevia's got a nice low glycemic. Anything that's low glycemic or the other thing is, with Jim, with Standard Process has Diaplex. Diaplex helps break down it helps metabolize those carbohydrates faster. So if you can metabolize those carbohydrates faster after you take something, you're not getting the conversion as well.
And Genema slows down.
Genema, absolutely. All right, so let's see, one other thing we want to go over quickly here is that the other part of the test that we've included here is this cognitive function test, okay? And why this is important is because this gives everybody a baseline of where they are today. Okay, where their memory is, where their attention is, where their processing speed is. It's a 15-minute test that shows you where you are compared to other people. The great thing is it's all age normed. So if I am at a score of 6.5 today, I should be a 6.5 year after year after year, which means I am aging normally. My brain function is aging normally. Okay, if I go from a 6.5 to next year 5.5, and then to 4.5, I am aging faster, and there's actual problems with those areas of my brain. So if it's a memory score, that hippocampal area, these are very basic functions, so it's not a lot of skill, it's more just actually measuring function in those areas. So we can actually measure the function of the hippocampus and see, is that thinning? Is there less connections? Is it transferring enough electricity to control your memory or your processing speed? There's not skill in just reacting as fast as you can to a choice, right? But you can see if it's starting to slow down, is there something on the sensory motor movement or the sensory motor strip that's actually impeding some of your motion? If it is, most of those things at first, early on, we can address with nutrition. And, sometimes it's exercise, too. Exercise is hugely important in this, too. But exercise and nutrition, lifestyle, we can address. If you let those go too long, then it becomes more difficult. The longer it goes and the more it breaks down, you want to get these things early on, and you can address it. So this gives patients an easy way to understand their baseline and to actually see if there's degradation that's happening, or hopefully they're getting on even better products, and they're actually seeing that their memory is improving or their attention's improving. Imagine kids, instead of going to a doctor and getting on stimulant medication, taking this test and getting off sugar for a little bit, increasing the amount of protein they have, and actually seeing and increasing their omega-3s and seeing their attention getting better and better and better. You can know that your brain function is getting better right away. And what I love about this is it gives patients the ability to measure things right now. Most nutrition is talking about preventing something that's going to happen 20 years from now. It's great when the doctor's scaring you into it, but the second you leave and you got to purchase your next order, or you're going through all these pills every single day and you're getting lazy, you start to stop and the compliance goes down. But if you put someone on this and say, hey, we're going to put you on this for 90 days, we're going to watch your blood change and your actual membranes change, you're going to watch from where you are compared to research now to where you are here, we're going to actually measure you again and see your memory improve, see your processing speed improve. People are hooked. It's like, this is changing me now. This is making me better at business today. This is making me better, in my ability to pay attention in relationships today. This is so important, and it's also preventing, yes, in the future, but it's very relevant today. So it really brings a functional side to it, where most blood tests and most nutrition is very just long-term preventative. Where it does so many things right now, and especially when you do it right. If you address the omega-3s first, and then the other thing that's so important to especially brain health, but the entire body, is magnesium. I can't say enough about magnesium. Okay, magnesium it is the actual gatekeeper to that calcium ion channel in every cell. If you have low magnesium, there is no gatekeeper to that. Okay, so either calcium's flooding in and causing a lot of anxiety and a lot of problems, headaches, musculoskeletal problems, pain, chronic pain when those neurons are just going, or it's blocking too much and staying shut for too long, and it's going to cause problems too. The problem with most calcium deficiencies is fixing the magnesium. You fix the magnesium, calcium will take care of itself as long as you're within normal dietary consumption. But magnesium is so important. Omega-3s are so important. Those are the two that I think are the most important to the cell, to optimizing the cell. And then you add the other stuff on, and they can get in the cell. They can all help. They can do a lot of things. But if you don't get those two right first, you're not going to get the same benefit from the other. Except for all of standard processed products, all are just amazing, right? They get right through. Get the plug there. He's going to kill me when I say only two things are most important. So again, the cognitive test is used by all these companies. And, the cognitive test is really the most underrated part of this assessment, because people just kind of like, I'll just do that too. But this cognitive test costs doctors, they have 14,000 doctors using it around the country. It costs them $79 per test to do. That's what they charge, Brain Resource International Database. Okay, you're getting that included for free inside this test. Okay, the only reason being is because I run this company's brain health program and got Brain Resource a multi-million dollar deal with them to do a bunch of stuff, and got to know the CEO of the company real well, and worked out a deal to be able to get this at the lowest cost in this, to be able to really showed them the mission we're on to change people, and the amount of research that we can get from this of showing cognitive changes when you address the cell health. And so it's an amazing deal to have that cognitive test. This is the highest rated of retest validity. This test was developed from Pfizer with a $30 million grant from Pfizer. Okay? And the reason being is because Pfizer needed a super sensitive cognitive test all against a normalized database to be able to test some different stimulant, different neurotransmitter type drugs they were working on. So what they did is they created this normative database of age 8 to 90, all age based. So there's thousands of people or hundreds of people in every age group all the way up. But every single person has a full DNA sequencing, a full functional MRI, a full battery of pen and paper neuropsych tests, a full EEG. Every single person in that database. This is not everybody that takes this goes into the database. This is a normalized database that says, as best as we can tell with every amount of technology we have, this person appears to be neurotypical. And we have that all age-based, all gender-based, and based on years of education. Okay? And so that is a huge part of this, and that's what you're comparing yourself to when you do this. Again, we'll kind of skip through this. The other thing the test does, or will do next week, this page was just developed, and it's kind of, everybody's been asking us for, we give about a 10-page report, and there's all this good information in it, but the patient gets home and doesn't know, I don't know, the doctor pointed out that I needed vitamin D somewhere in there. And so with this, it's a single page at the end. It gives all the indexes we measure, what they are important to. It gives them up to their 4 last tests and shows them a trend. It shows them their current score, because this should all be in the green. Okay, all that in the green is going to give you the absolute best health, the best neuron health, the best brain function, everything. And then it tells you anything that's low, it actually gives you the specific nutritional recommendations that can help that. So it's all on one page. Yes?
This is all from a blood test?
Yes. Well, blood test and cognitive. The cognitive test as well. Yes?
When did you say that would be available by next week?
This should be programmed in hopefully by the end of next week. Yeah. Yes?
So when you're starting with somebody on this and you do the testing, do you recommend do it, again, I heard you say 90 days?
Yeah.
So you follow it for 90 days, get them stabilized, and then do it like a yearly recheck?
Yeah, so typically it would be today, 90 days from now, and then yearly. Now, if for some reason they didn't get to the stabilization or to the maintenance, the other reason why you want to get, when you take it right now, if you have a real deficient, it's going to recommend a fairly high dose. It could be 3,000 milligrams of EPA-DHA. If you take it 90 days and you've achieved that good status, it will change it to a maintenance dose that you need just to maintain that, which could be 1,500 or 1,000 milligrams. So you want to see where that is and where that's going to be. And then what you want to do, the absolute best is to, if my business partner is here, is the medical director of the U.S. Army, he would say, you have to test 90 days after that because you want to test the maintenance dose to make sure it's maintaining well. And if that is stabilized over that time, then you go to annual. So that is probably the gold standard. Most people don't want to pay for the test that many times. So taking into budget accounts and stuff, typically we do now, 90 days, and then yearly. Yes?
The other concern that I have is because fish oil does increase bleeding.
Well,
Has that potential. So how do you address that or concern?
So if you email me, I can send you all the latest research from the best doctors in the country that will completely demystify that fish oil decreases or increases bleeding. Fish oil normalizes bleeding. Okay? And the problem is so many people have decreased bleeding that fish oil normalizes it and appears like it's actually doing it. But the amount my business partner, in order to get this into Iraq, went through ridiculous limits because first thing everybody said, the Surgeon General and everything, we can't do this. This is a high chance, high risk of someone getting shot, injured or anything. It could increase bleeding. We never do that to someone that is in that type of environment. And there actually shows it thins the blood to a normative level to what actually should be perfect. Like it's almost like taking a baby aspirin, per day. It should get to a normal level, but it actually increases capillary growth and all these things to where you actually don't bleed as much if you get cut. So there's a hospital up in Washington now with a renowned surgeon up there that puts his patients on high-dose omega-3s now prior to surgery because the healing happens so much faster. Capillary growth after being cut and stuff happens so much faster, and they actually have less bleeding, and the blood is at the optimum amount of thinness to actually be able to heal faster and do what they need to do. So we have all kinds of published reports from the U.S. Army now, all the way to some of the top surgeons that is completely demystified about that. Yes?
So you're saying that the results are going to give you a suggestion to as to which supplements are and how much?
It will give a dose based on where your blood is today to get to the 8% level. If you take this amount, you will get there. There's about a 95% chance you'll get there.
And is that what you were saying will be ready next week?
No, that's already in there. The only thing that would be is this kind of summary report, which takes all the nutritional recommendations out of all the 10 pages of the report and puts them on one page so the patient can see everything at one time.
I have my results, and I don't see in there where it says the amount.
Oh, okay. It'd be on the omega-3 index page. Okay, look down at the bottom where it says recommendation.
It's not a summary, it's not
It's
each one.
exactly. It's after each one. Right. Yeah. And this will, what's nice too is that this will put all that right here, the actual amount you need to take right on this one pager. We out of time, Jim?
Are you
Sir,
okay?
If you had an old one done, can you?
Yes, you can regenerate.
Okay.
Yep, as soon as it's up, you can regenerate. So the other thing we just added to this, which will be available at the same time, which you can regenerate your reports, is this takes all the latest scientific relevant data based on omega-3s, telomere attrition, accelerated brain aging, all this stuff together based on the inflammation, AA to EPA ratio, palmitic acid, and leptin insulin resistance, the omega-3 index, and how that the DHA breaks down in the brain when there's deficiencies, takes all that peer-reviewed literature and puts it all through an algorithm to actually give you your cell aging trajectory score. Now, obviously, it's a projected score. We can't know exactly, but this is all based on the literature to actually show you where you are and how fast your brain is going to be going down. So patients can easily see, do you want this type of decline as you age, or do you want this type of decline? And when you stay up here, your risk of cognitive decline and really cancers and all kinds of inflammatory diseases as well becomes a lot less, because you're actually handling the cells right and controlling the inflammation that causes so much of this problem. So this is a great little kind of little summary where people can see when I change these things how it changes there. Yes.
Have they done any studies with the older vets, like World War II vets, who are now coming up with the PTSD as they're aging, and the brain health and the fatty acid levels?
It has not. There is not. That'd be a great studies to see. Yep. Absolutely. It's one of the first things we do on the younger guys that we're working with is get their fatty acid levels right. And that's where we're really trying to work on getting the Army to address that before they go over. Because you become so much more resilient to a problem. It costs the Army $50 billion a year after the fact, where it could cost them maybe $100 million to address it ahead of time. Yes?
So how would we, if you wanted to target a population of kids that are on the spectrum or vaccine damage in particular, and once we put them on the spectrum, how are we going to use this, and is there some of this information maybe to help them
So
dealing with another set of damage?
Absolutely. And most autistic or spectrum disorders are really a disorder of disconnectivity in the brain. Okay, so you either have a disconnection of having a lot with the sensory integration to the executive function areas, or a couple of the areas where there's disconnections. So it's in EEG, we call it coherence, where you need to have that coherence together of the communication. So with this helps stimulate BDNF and growth. And in kids with autistic spectrum disorders have lower amounts of BDNF. Through studies. So you want to do everything you can to get that kid to have a higher amount of BDNF and grow more, have more neurogenesis and grow more connections, so that you can start connecting those areas of the brain. So again, changing capacity-wise, neurotoxins, anything actually stops BDNF. It can lower it. It can cause all kinds of issues with connectivity and stuff as well. Yeah.
So if you have a nonverbal autistic child that you like to test, but they can't do the internet portion.
Right.
Do you still get something good?
Absolutely. You still do the blood test. You don't have to do the cognitive test at all. So a lot of people can't do it or don't do it, and you still get all the blood test results.
Will that number be affected if they don't do the cognitive
This
test?
does not include the cognitive test on this right now. This is just the blood.
Okay.
Is there a shelf life? Like if you buy X number of
Kits. So we say the shelf life is 2 years because it's been tested 2 years later with no degradation. And the only reason there would even be a shelf life is the antioxidants that we treat the actual card with. Now, do realize that, and most people don't know this, you talk about, there is 2 or 3 other labs that do omega-3 testing, okay? Now, something like Quest or LabCorp is going to do blood, or whole blood or plasma or serum, which is going to give you a score that's all over the place. It's not going to give you consistent at all. The other companies are putting your blood spot on a standardized sample paper. Okay, that sample paper, that fatty acid, if it's not protected, it's still the omega-3s in there, will degrade at about 2% per every 2 days. Okay, so if you start out with a score of 8 when you do it, if it is not processed in 2 days, you're down to a 6. Okay, ours is the only paper, the only test out there that is treated with a special antioxidant that was developed in the U.S. Army because we had to transport it from Iraq all the way over here to the lab to get it processed. That this antioxidant site has been tested for 30 days of complete stability of that fatty acid in there. So you get the same score here versus if it's processed in a day. So that is the only reason we put even 2 years on it, because we've tested it 2 years later and it's still there. It could work for 5 years. We just haven't tested it for 5 years. So I would count on 2 knowing for sure you're good. But you probably can even go longer. Yes?
Can you go over that, you talked about leptin?
Yeah.
Can you go over that little just pathway, like how you want to keep the leptin up?
Keep the leptin signaling. So you want to keep the palmitic acid low, which keeps leptin response working correctly. Okay, it's going back and forth. This leptin signaling is going back and forth between the brain and the fat cells, and it's actually communicating between that, and it actually changes the hormonal responses in the fat cells to allow them to burn off fat or store fat. Okay, it also communicates with your body as far as metabolism and regulating, the amount of ATP and stuff in those cells and the mitochondria function, and so all that is all part of leptin signaling. And when palmitic acid gets too high, it stops that and inhibits that signaling.
Okay.
Yeah.
I started using this a while ago. I can't remember when we started.
Yeah.
I know we're in the first 100. Over 43 years in practice, I can say this is probably the most effective tool I've ever found for communicating with patients, especially when it comes to nutritional recommendations. All we use is standard process. The oils make such a huge difference, the omega-3s, whether you're using tuna omega or calamari, like you said, you like to drink it. I'm not big on calamari.
Right.
It's with heavy whipping cream.
Exactly.
What's the other one? The cod liver oil, 3 of those a day.
Right.
I just, max out
Right.
on it. And when I do this with patients and we recheck them, they're astonished with the results.
Right.
And one thing you didn't mention, even though your father is a chiropractor, I'm sure there's acupuncturists in here too, or other providers. I find that, when you give an adjustment, especially in the upper cervical area, we stimulate and increase that mechanoreceptor response, and it just drives electricity into the brain.
Absolutely.
And when you've got them on the right nutritional protocols and you combine it with an adjustment, it's not so much that the patients feel better. That's great. It's always great. But the fact that you've mentioned this again and again is the outcome measurement is a physiological change that's measurable, which proves to the patient beyond a shadow of a doubt that they've improved, and they can see the change. They can see the color change. It's just been the most effective tool I've ever used. I just wanted to say that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You talked about the high dose. Is calamari higher enough dose for that?
So 1 teaspoon of calamari has 1,200 milligrams of DHA and EPA in it. So depending on it, they're probably going to be somewhere between 1,000 and 3,000.
3,000.
So there's going to be 1 to 3 teaspoons. 3 teaspoons would be probably the actual...
On the initial ramp up and then stabilize.
And the tuna omegas are lower?
Dose of tuna omega is 360.
Per capsule.
So
you're going to take a lot on the ramp up. On the maintenance, you're going to be taking
first,
6 or so.
And then slow down.
Right.
So
Right.
calamari, you're saying if somebody's on the ramp up.
So
you're going to take more.
1,200 milligrams of DHA and EPA. So that's what you're looking for. It doesn't matter what the oil is. It's 1,200 milligrams
Right.
is what you're looking for. So like a teaspoon, the absolute maximum would probably be 3 teaspoons a day to start with. But realistically, you're going to be on 1 or 2 per day.
And don't let people talk to you too much about, krill oil is so much better than fish oil and stuff too. That realize krill oil is great too, but really EPA and DHA that gets into your blood is all that matters. Okay, and krill oil is twice as absorbed. Okay, you will need half the dose of krill oil to get the same, but it's also twice as expensive. So it really, dollar for dollar, it's no different at all for the amount of EPA and DHA you're getting into the blood.
And what's vital about oils is what you said, is the quality
Right.
of the oil.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and we have tested a tremendous amount of people on standard process on the calamari oil and stuff. We wouldn't work with them if to promote these things if we didn't know it changes. So yeah.
The DHA portion is more for the anti-inflammatory, and the EPA is more for your memory.
Opposite.
Opposite?
Yep.
Okay.
So DHA is the building block of the actual fatty neurons, right? So you need DHA for, most memory problems are thinning of the hippocampus. DHA helps build that back up. EPA is more of an anti-inflammatory side. So like for depression, pain relief and stuff, you want higher EPA. Now the problem is, again, this is something well known to standard process, is that typically, science says, okay, we know DHA is best for that and EPA is best for this, so we will extract all DHA and give you just only DHA for if you have a memory problem, and we're going to give you only EPA if you have this. The problem is DHA doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier as fast without EPA. And EPA also helps get it into all parts of the brain. It helps the fluidity of that and deliver the delivery side. And same thing with if you do all EPA, it just gets in there real quick, but you're not actually building up portions of those neurons and everything of the cells as well. So the combination of EPA, DHA together is always the best, no matter what you're doing. You want to have, if you want higher dose, because you need a certain amount of DHA, just increase the dose to get that much DHA and get the EPA that comes with it. If you need more EPA, keep the DHA too. They both work synergistically.
The different depending on what kind of fish you eat. The calamari has higher, I think it's DHA, EPA, so it's all.
And the biggest thing is if you're taking enough, you're taking what we're showing you on this, you will have enough of both. Yeah.
So let's wrap it up, and then if you've got some questions, you can come and see Brian afterwards. So let's give him a big hand of applause.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it. I thought it was phenomenal.